It's occurred to me that I think there's an aspect of what this country, the United States of America, is really supposed to be. And this is kind of a reaction to, I think there's a push or whatever to try to sell back some federal lands back to the states and things like that. And it kind of triggered this in me. Um, as far as I understand it, yeah, I could be wrong. Who am I? I'm just a godfather. The United States of America is never meant to be a country that is ruled from some big centralized semi-authoritarian whatever type of government in some distant spot away from everybody. I mean, yeah, I live in Virginia, so I'm right next door to DC, but think about the people in Oklahoma, Wyoming, Alaska, California. Like, they can't just like swing into DC easily. The United States of America is it's just supposed to be a bunch of states. It's actually like each state really should be its own country in a way, right? Like Virginia had its government, its state government, and everything just goes to the state. The whole design of the constitutionality and the federalism and where it all really came from was that each individual state would govern itself how it wants to be governed by its people. And if you didn't want to live in that state, you could easily move to another state, sure. But basically, everything is supposed to be about states making the decisions, not the federal government making all the decisions for us. Each state's supposed to do it. And then all that happened when it came to the federal constitution and all of that is that the 13 states that there were at the time said, all right, look, each state's going to do its own thing, and that's cool. However, there are some very specific, explicit things that we're all going to agree to add, kind of give the authority to the federal national government to deal with. And those are very clearly enumerated responsibilities. And then they threw the 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights to say, and anything that isn't given to the federal government to have authority, anything we don't cede authority to the federal government for, reverts back to the states and the people. 10th Amendment might, I mean, yes, First Amendment is obviously the most important one. Second Amendment protects it, but the 10th Amendment is what made this country what it is, which is if we don't give that authority to the federal government, to the president, to the Senate, to the Congress, then it goes back to the states. It belongs to us. Each state is supposed to be its own mini country, but we all agreed to kind of almost like a national umbrella on very specific limited things, like being able to deal with commerce across state lines, right? Because you're just gonna be able to bounce between the two. And we're like, we don't want to deal with passports going from Virginia to Maryland, stuff like that. In many ways, it's what the European Union is trying to do, but they're late. They're too late to it. The European Union is a bunch of countries trying to say, well, we're going to cede some of our unique individual countries' authorities to this centralized European Union government while trying to retain our own things. But they're so backwards that and they're 250 years late to the game. That was our experiment. Like, that's why the United States of America is the greatest experiment ever, and to this day has continued to be successful because we basically got to start with a blank slate, and the geniuses of our founders and all of that came up with it. So when we talk about wanting to strip power away from the federal government and get it back to the government, it's the people, it's the states trying to take back what is supposed to be ours. We need to stop giving power to the federal government. It needs to go back to the states so that we can deal with it at a state level. And you take the Roe v. Wade decision. All that did was get the federal government out of the thing of abortion. The federal government has nothing to do with abortion. It shouldn't be in there. They've got nothing to do with it. There's nothing in the Constitution, and we should not cede that power to the federal government. That power resides to the states to decide. And then if you don't like what your states decide, you don't even have to get a passport or a visa. You could just go live in another state. And that's the whole idea. People want to, get the government out of, the federal government out of so much of our personal business. Great. Then let's stop giving them that power. Let's start giving it back. So thinking back, to this amendment that they're trying to throw into this bill or whatever, to where they can take about 3 million acres of federally land that fits in very limited, type of criteria, and make it available to sell back to the states or to others, is not necessarily a bad thing. Like let's give it back to the states. Let's give this land back to the people. And you know me, I love the national parks. I love that there are national parks, and I think there is value in, you know, some that's a national thing. That's a broad thing, and I'm all for that, and I want to protect those lands and all of that. But that doesn't mean that the federal government should be doing a land grab for 25, 30, 50% of all land to be owned by the federal government. That's not a good thing. Like, we want the federal government to own less land, not more land, right? Let the states own the land. Let the people own the land, not some big authoritarian centralized government coming out of DC dictating things from, top down. Leave it to the people.